Hello and welcome to a video on resting potentials as part of the neuronal communication topic. So if we're looking at the definition of a resting potential, it is the potential difference across the membrane while a neuron is at rest. And although we say that the neuron's at rest, it's actually involved in a lot of active processes that are involved in ATP, because it is actively pumping ions across the plasma membrane, although it is not transmitting any action potentials. So what's actually happening here then is that I think it's worth saying that the purpose of this is to try and maintain the potential difference, which is when you're dealing with positive and negative charges. So the inside of the neuron has to be a more negative charge. So if I just drew like a quick neuron, ignore the drawing, but yeah, this has to be a lot more negative than the outside, which should be positive. And in that way we can conduct our action potential. So the resting potential is what's happening when the cell is preparing for an action potential and we are actively pumping ions in order to get this balance correct. So using sodium and potassium pumps, which again using our ATP, we are pumping 3 sodium ions out for every 2 potassium ions pumped in. And because these are both positive charges, we're getting rid of 3 positive charges and we're only taking 2 back in. So we're decreasing. We're getting rid of 1 positive charge for every time that we're pumping these ions about. I've just written 1 positive charge over here. But important to remember that the gated sodium ion channels remain closed. It is the potassium ion channels, I'm just going to put P for potassium even though I know it's K. The potassium ions the channels are open, and so the plasma membrane is more permeable to potassium ions than to sodium. So I'm going to put the membrane is more permeable. This is probably something that you get a mark for saying, I should imagine. So I would encourage mentioning this if we're talking about resting potentials, that the membrane is more permeable to potassium ions than to sodium ions. Remember, if you're saying that it's more permeable to potassium ions, you have to say compared to sodium ions. So this is why our potassium ions, they will tend to diffuse out of the cell. So they're going to diffuse out. Okay. Which is, again, we're going to make sure that by these potassium ions diffusing out of the cell, we're going to make the inside of the cell even more negatively charged, which is what we want. I'll just rub this out and then we can go back over a couple more things that help to increase the negative charge even further. So the inside of the cell contains anions, which are negative. And these cannot move in or out of the cell, so the interior of the cell is maintained at a negative potential compared to the outside. So we can say that it's got a negative potential compared to the outside. Again, if you were saying this in a question, you can't just say negative potential, you've got to say compared to the outside, because you've got to say compared to what? Compared to the outside of the cell. So this is why we can say that the plasma membrane is polarized. So the whole purpose of pumping these ions is that we're going to maintain a negative charge and we're going to maintain this potential difference. So even though it is at rest, we're actually doing a lot of exchanging of ions, so we're using a lot of ATP. So we've got it polarized, and the potential difference is minus 70 MV. So this would be, if we were to see it on graph, to show you what it would look like, because they do often ask these questions when they're talking about action potentials. So we might start at minus 7 to here, and then you might get to probably minus 45. I'm not sure if it's minus 45. And we'd start a line, this is where the resting potential is, depolarized, go to the top, and then we're going to go hyperpolarized, and then back to resting potential. So if they ever ask, where's your resting potential, it's going to be here and here. Make sure you're seeing both areas, because they are both showing resting potentials before and after. And that is everything we need to know about resting potentials. After this, I recommend watching the video on generator potentials, which can often occur after the resting potential. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching.